and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about on today's show related to the entertainment side of the NFL. On today's rundown of the episode, I'm going to bring you guys the potential contract extension coming down the line for 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy and how the 49ers are pretty open to doing that, so that's good for Brock Purdy. Hard Knocks, the television show that goes on throughout the NFL season for a specific NFL team, will now be extending it to a whole division, so I'll get into that a little bit more, as well as LSU's Pro Day that happened yesterday and how it was very impressive and a very big performance from Malik Neighbors and their quarterback Jaden Daniels. So all of that is coming up later on today's episode. Before I jump into the first segment, however, please remember to follow, like, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast on social media or either YouTube channel, as well as reminding you guys, if you have any questions or comments during today's live show, to use the tip and donations link running across your screen there. The tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. This makes sure I'm able to see your questions pop up right away in the live chat box. I can read your questions on air and maybe take the conversation somewhere else. It's a lot more engaging and entertaining for me if you guys are able to do this. I think it makes the show more fun, on top of helping the show a lot, as well as all the other shows across the network. So we always thank you guys immensely when you guys are able to use the tip and donations link with any of your questions. Saying that, I can start with the first topic on today's episode, the TV schedules and the NFL making some changes to some of them. Not so much bringing a lot of changes to week, but the TV schedules and streaming really most of all, with Peacock, Amazon Prime getting more involved. There's some international games as well. So with that being said, the biggest international game to start off the season is in the first week. It will take place on Friday night opening weekend for the NFL, in which the most likely it will be the Eagles playing in that game, and they will either be facing the Cleveland Browns or the Green Bay Packers in that game, September 6th on a Friday, streaming exclusively on Peacock. It'll be the first ever NFL game in South America, and it'll be the first NFL game played on a Friday night on opening weekend in 50 years. As well as I mentioned, the international games. There's 3 other games in London and 1 other one in Germany as well. Those have become a bit more routine, but now we get this Brazil game, the first ever one in South America with the Eagles. And I said either the Browns or the Green Bay Packers, but it was funny that I don't remember when, but Maurice Hurst, a Browns defensive tackle, was on a local television network getting interviewed about the team and whatnot, and he pretty much said that, he was talking about the season, and he said, we have a game in Brazil this year. Not confirming it right then and there so blatantly, but you can't get much more obvious than that, and it's looking like it will be the Browns versus the Eagles in Brazil, which will be, it'll be very exciting for me to see how that all plays out. The NFL taking all of their hype and popularity down to South America, where obviously it's not the number one sport. I don't know how popular it is down there or how notable people down there keep up with the NFL, but it will be interesting to see it all play out, how much media attention is on the players bringing their game down there, and even things like weather, the climate, and just being in a new environment, how that affects both teams. I'm sure there'll be a lot more attention on that leading up to the game, but that's one thing. Streaming exclusively on Peacock is also another big thing, because that seems to be where the landscape is shifting with all these streaming networks and stuff like that. Peacock got exclusively their playoff game last season with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins, and with that, They were able to get an average of 23 million viewers during that game. They reached about 27.6 million viewers in total. And just in terms of records for Peacock, it was the largest day in Peacock's history with 16.3 million concurrent devices streaming at the same time. So it is a big deal to have Peacock still doing this, an NBC streaming network. I'm sure they're going to get more involved down the line, but this is a big development in that. And similarly connected to that, talking about playoff games and streaming networks, it was also announced that Amazon Prime Video, the network that has exclusive rights to Thursday night games, all the Thursday night games are now played on Amazon Prime Video. Now they will have the exclusive rights to a wild card game this season, January 2025. It was reported that Amazon Prime is paying about $120 million for the rights to show the game, which is $10 million more than what NBC paid to show the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins on Peacock. Like I mentioned, the numbers speak for themselves, and on that, adding Amazon Prime now to the list of streaming networks to stream a playoff game, Roger Goodell, the biggest thing with Goodell, he said, was that he doesn't want the Super Bowl ever to get to that point. I'm not saying it's getting there, but he did say that he wants to fish, the NFL wants to fish where the fish are, meaning where all the attention and where all the common now familiarity with streaming and where everybody watches their shows on is heading towards streaming now. And the NFL is smart, obviously, to follow that trend and continue that on. But it does bring worries just because people don't want to pay for these subscriptions, keep track of all of them, and trying to figure out which game is on Peacock, which game is on Amazon Prime, and stuff like that. It can get confusing for some people, but like I mentioned, like many people have mentioned, it's just an adjustment period. I'm sure people will get used to it, but that's the way the NFL is going. And before we get to the biggest news, it is also announced that the Hall of Fame game will be played between the Bears and the Texans on Thursday, August 1st at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium at 8 p.m. It will take place during the Pro Football Hall of Fame Enrichment Week in Canton, Ohio, so that all lines up. And it makes sense for these two teams because the Bears have 3 Hall of Famers in that class getting enshrined: Devin Hester, Steve McMichael, and Julius Peppers. And the Texans have Andre Johnson, the first Texan ever to be elected into the Hall of Fame. So that was announced. Potentially we could get some exciting play from Caleb Williams if he is drafted to the Bears and if he is playing in that game. So that was also announced. But the biggest thing is the Christmas Day games. A big deal because not only is Christmas on a Wednesday this year, which is already weird for the NFL to play on a Wednesday, but before it was stated, I'm pretty sure it was mentioned by the NFL's Vice President of Broadcasting, Mike North, that the NFL wasn't going to try and play on Christmas when it fell on a Tuesday last season, and that they were going to keep their stance, that they weren't going to try and make this a regular thing. But obviously, with the numbers coming in and the money coming in and how much attention it gains playing on Christmas, people will regardless be glued to their screens watching. They went back on it, and now they will play a double header on Christmas. And it is weird, like I mentioned, it's not a regular thing for the NFL. Through 2015, 96 seasons of the NFL, there was only 17 games played on Christmas, and from 1948 to last season, there has only been 2 games played on a Wednesday of all days in NFL history back in 2012 between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. And then a game was switched to Wednesday in 2020 because of COVID between the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. So this year, that's going to change. Another game on Wednesday, not to mention 2 games by the NFL. And if you look at the whole spectrum of the schedule this year, there's going to be NFL games at least on one day of every week, at least once this year, except Tuesday. You got the Monday games, Thursdays, Friday, like I mentioned, with the Eagles. There's going to be games on Saturday, obviously Sunday, then Monday. Tuesday is the only day of the week this season where there's never going to be an NFL game. But you honestly never know if you have some schedule issues. I'm sure something could and potentially has the potential to go wrong. So there's always a chance. I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL moved the game to Tuesday at least once this year, with them being so open to really taking over the week with this move on Christmas. It does bring some backlash because people do want to spend time with their families, do want to be around everybody else, and not really have to focus on football. The point was brought up today to me that fantasy championships are also during this week, and it gets pretty serious during fantasy if you're in the championship or you're in that last place game. You're looking to see if you're gonna take the punishment or if you're gonna win yourself a good amount of money. So people will take this pretty seriously. They don't want to necessarily on Christmas because they want to spend time with their families and whatnot. But the NFL, from a business perspective and just trend perspective, trying to make the most revenue and stuff like that, by doing this, it's similar to the NBA where they've really had the Christmas games. Everyone's looking forward to watching Christmas NBA games. The whole day is filled with those games. But it really hasn't, I think people have gotten just used to it. A little, I don't want to say tired of it, but it doesn't bring too much excitement that much, I feel like, in my opinion. So now with the NFL doing it, if they could take this over and make this a regular thing, like I mentioned before, it is an adjustment period. People will have what they have to say at the start, but I just think they will grow into it. And once 2 years pass, 3 years pass, if the NFL is still doing this, they're going to grow into it. And I think the NFL will have the best chance of taking this over because of how the seasons play out. There's a lot less games in the NFL. The NBA, there's tons of games. So the Christmas games don't really mean that much. It's only about halfway through the season, not even. So those games don't really have as much significance as the NFL ones when the playoffs are right on the cusp. And these games mean a lot to some of these teams in terms of seeding and getting the head-to-head over another team if they're vying for one more spot in the playoffs. These games mean a lot more. There's a lot less games, obviously, in the NFL. So the games are more important. You can guarantee the NFL is gonna make them really good games as well in terms of scheduling, who's facing who on Christmas. So all of it points to the NFL games probably being more entertaining, and I wouldn't be surprised, I'm sure, when the game information viewership comes out towards the end of this year that the NFL games drew in a lot more audience than the NBA games. Not to mention there's only 2 NFL games, but the NBA has a lot more games on those days. So it does make sense that the NFL is taking advantage of this opportunity. Looking big picture, what I think of it, I don't hate it right now. I can see the backlash, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Same with the streaming. I don't want to make like an old joke or something, but I just think it's the older generation of people that don't want to learn streaming and want to get into trying to figure out all these networks of what's streaming where and that stuff. I think for the younger generation that's used to this sort of stuff already, it falls a lot easier. I don't have a problem trying to figure out where these games are being streamed. That's just me. But again, these changes don't really affect me too much. I'm open to it. I like seeing a bit of change with the NFL, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing which teams play on Christmas and how that'll play out. But it's still going to gain a lot of people's attention. It's still going to do great. The NFL says they don't want to make this a regular thing, but that's probably a lie. Once they see the revenue come in, it's going to become a regular thing. Even if it doesn't fall on Wednesday and it fits in the schedule more, it's going to become a regular thing for the NFL. And it's interesting right now how everything's trending towards streaming and stuff like that. The NFL's wise to hop on that trend and try to adjust to it. So that's that. That's the streaming entertaining where you can find your games this upcoming season if you were wondering what all those changes were. But now I'll put a pin in that segment and I will go to the first break of the show. And when I come back, I will talk more in depth about the LSU Pro Day that happened yesterday. The biggest winners are Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels from that and how they performed and how they measured and all that stuff. So that's coming up. Don't go anywhere. I have a lot more on today's show of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here, ready to jump into the second segment of the show, having to do with LSU's Pro Day that happened yesterday. It had obviously a lot of people there, a lot of representatives from most or all of the teams in the NFL. The Patriots especially had 9 guys there, including a lot of assistant offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, as well as Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf, their general manager. Antonio Pierce was there. Dan Quinn was there. Adam Peters, the Commanders general manager, was there. Joe Hortiz, the Chargers general manager, was also there. So it drew in a lot of people for this pro day. Joe Shane was there, as well as Brian Dable, and the Bears head coach Matt Eberflus was also there. What's the biggest news coming out of this, the biggest takeaways were obviously seeing how Malik Neighbors tested and how Jaden Daniels tested, because both of them got no medicals done at the NFL Combine, nor did they throw or do any drills at the Combine as well. So a lot of anticipation went into this around those two players to see what they were looking like physically, medically wise, and just on the field drills, how crisp it looks, and how really NFL ready they're training to become. They're not going to be perfect, but a lot of stock is invested in these pro days, and a lot of stock can rise after these pro days. You saw it with J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams as well. Not as much because he's already, touted as the best prospect, but even still, it did make people feel good to see how he was as a person, character-wise, how much fun he was having that day. So those things can differ in different ways around these pro days. General managers, coaches, and stuff like that can take a lot away from it off the field as well. But on the field, Jaden Daniels, touted as the second prospect to be taken to the Washington Commanders. He, surprisingly to me, wasn't going to do any athletic tests really at his pro day. Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network reported that and was only going to focus on throwing. His session lasted or was about 50 passes in his workout, a combination of different deep balls, intermediate routes, short routes, and timing and stuff like that. It's all very impressive. I don't think that really affected too many people's view of him. They already knew he was pretty talented, arm-wise and strength and everything like that, ball placement. Yeah, he had some throws get away from him, overthrew some receivers and stuff like that, but it wasn't a lot. And I don't think it differed or made anybody change their opinion of Jaden Daniels. And just on that, the measurements were a bit more interesting to me and I'm sure to other people because during the season, Daniels measured in at 6'4", 210 pounds. That was a big concern for a lot of people. His thin frame, he's not as big or as thick as some of the other guys. J.J. McCarthy weigh a lot more than him. And at yesterday's pro day, he came in at 6'3", about 210 pounds as well. and his hand size were on the smaller side, 9 3/8 inches, the fourth smallest hands at quarterback measured at the combine. But I would know how much hand sizes mean, right? Because that's the whole story around Kenny Pickett when he was drafted, being a Steelers fan. That was the biggest thing. But even still, with his hand measurements being what they were actually bigger than Drake Mays and J.J. McCarthy. So take that and do what you will with that. That was the biggest thing for Jaden Daniels. The measurements came in about the same, so it doesn't look like he really focused in too much on getting heavier, trying to look the part, because he is talented, and I'm sure he'll just bet on himself and bet on what's worked for him so far. He won the Heisman, obviously, and they talked to Jaden Daniels afterwards about his workout, and he said, I would say the main thing was just trying to sell my consistency within the pocket and my form. Other stuff was just kind of fun, meaning all the extra throws and getting excited with Malik Neighbors on top of that other stuff. Really focusing in, I thought interestingly, was his pocket movement. Consistency is another big thing. That's already a trend with Caleb Williams. It seemed like those two things were pretty prominent at his pro day. People have seen the extracurricular plays, the extension of plays, those special traits that make them who they are. With these two guys, people were really focused in on, can you throw from the pocket? Are your fundamentals good? And I think Jaden Daniels, much like Caleb Williams, much like Dan Orlovsky said on ESPN about Caleb Williams' pro day, underwhelming was the word that he used. And I think it does have some truth, just because people want to see all the boring stuff, right? Not what gains clicks, gains attention, a lot of stuff on social media a lot of the time. So that stuff still matters. They want to see if Jaden Daniels can do that. He proved it once again at his pro day. I don't think, if anything, it kept him the same or improved. Nothing about his pro day could really make you think worse about him. So Jaden Daniels, not too much changing from his point. It just really depends on preference and what you want at that quarterback position with a lot of these teams that were there. Another one, potentially a bigger winner than Jaden Daniels, was Malik Neighbors. A lot of attention on him as well. He's also vying to be that top receiver taken. I talked about it before. Some analysts, draft analysts, had him already above Marvin Harrison, and what he did at his pro day, measuring in at 6 foot, 199 pounds, ran a 4.35 40, which would have ranked fourth among all wide receivers that tested at the combine. 42-inch vertical, tied for third, and a 10.9 broad jump, which would have been sixth among all wide receivers. Already, from just those measurements, those medically taken tests that he did, already pretty impressive with him. His size. The biggest thing about Neighbors is his explosiveness and how quick he is able to get in and out of cuts. His route running is amazing, up there with some of the best ones. I guess it would be him and Roma Dunze as the best route runners. That 4.35, I think, blew a lot of people out of the water. A lot of people were impressed by that and how just quick and pretty much confirming everything they knew about his explosiveness. I don't think they were expecting 4.35, but it's still crazy to see him test like that, plus all the on-the-field drills that he did with Jaden Daniels. I'm sure everyone was taken pretty satisfied with that. And after his combine and after he did all the testing, after everything concluded, really, he is scheduled to meet with the Cardinals after his pro day, but before his pro day, he met with a few teams already. He met with the New England Patriots, the Titans, the Jaguars, the Jets, and he had dinner with the Giants as well as Jaden Daniels. They both had dinner with the Giants the night before. Afterwards, like I mentioned, he met with the Cardinals, pretty much falling in that range. The Titans could surprise some people just because they do sit seventh. They have Calvin Ridley and Hopkins, but they could just be doing their due diligence with this. You never know what they could be planning. Brian Callahan is a lot more vertical offense, a lot more spread offensive identity that he wants to bring to the Titans. So that's an idea out there. The Jacksonville Jaguars, again, they sit I want to say around 15 or 17 in this year's draft. So I know they just lost Calvin Ridley, so that's a big hole that they want to fill. Could they be trading up to maybe have a look at him? It hasn't been reported at all. So I don't really expect that to be a big thing, a big meeting with the Jaguars. The biggest thing is the Jets, the Giants, and really the Patriots, just because they're all in that range. The Jets are at 10, so they sit a bit further back, and how they could possibly attain him, again, a trade would have to happen. But now, like I mentioned, with him being so impressive at his pro day and showing everybody some impressive athletic testing, more reports have come out and have said that even this has put him over Harrison in a lot of other people's minds. I'm starting to lean that way, just because it's me and I'm very recency biased. That's a big thing that I think is super important. I'm seeing Malik Nabers test crazy at his pro day, looking very impressive, very NFL ready at his pro day with his cuts, his releases, how he's running the routes and stuff like that. That's in my mind. That's fresh in my mind already. Whereas Marvin Harrison, I haven't seen him. Granted, it's in an actual game, so that still holds value, but I haven't seen him in a while. So thinking, or I should say knowing, that he is a great talent, but seeing Nabers doing it now, it just puts that thought in your head that you can favor him a little bit. At least for me, I'm favoring Malik Nabers right now. And those two were the biggest winners out of LSU's pro day. Brian Thomas as well also tested, but he wasn't doing the 40 or any athletic testing, similar to Daniels, because he did that at the combine. And now you could really start thinking, how could this sort of pro day, everyone being surprised and raising their expectations more for these players now at their pro days, how could that affect a team like the Raiders, the Broncos, the Vikings now? They haven't really been connected to Daniels that much. It has been mostly J.J. McCarthy. But the Vikings still, they could also trade up, and maybe they like Daniels better now. It could all change in just a matter of this day at their pro day. And I saw a report coming here to do the show that it has been reported that the Raiders and the Vikings, I want to say, are the two teams now that have been the most active in trying to trade up after this pro day, after seeing Jaden Daniels. And what I thought is interesting, now connecting the dots a little bit, with the Raiders especially, Antonio Pierce obviously is their head coach. He makes the decisions a lot of the times. He has expressed his trust in Aiden O'Connell, and if he has to be the starting quarterback, he has earned the right to at least compete to be the starting quarterback, were his words. But with the Raiders now being reported to have more interest in trading up, you have to remember that Antonio Pierce actually recruited Jaden Daniels out of Southern California 5 years ago to play at Arizona State, where he started his college career. Then he obviously transferred over to LSU, but that connection exists right there between Pierce and Jaden Daniels. I'm sure it goes just beyond football. Getting recruited out of Southern California, Antonio Pierce being from that area, Jaden Daniels getting the opportunity to play in college through Antonio Pierce, I'm sure they hold some sort of pretty high personal connection between the both of them. So that's something to monitor as well. The Raiders, in all honesty, where they want to go or where Antonio Pierce wants this team to be, realistically, they're not going to get there with Aiden O'Connell just based on what he's shown you last season in the games that he played. They want to bring excitement. They want to bring this joy to games at Las Vegas, not only because they're trending upwards right now, signing Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby's on the team, Devontae Adams. You have these stars, but you're playing in Las Vegas, so people want to go there regardless, and you want them to go there to watch the Raiders play at Allegiant Stadium and draw more people in and really be the hottest commodity there out of Vegas if your team is really good, really exciting to watch. Jaden Daniels brings that running factor, out-of-pocket throws, extending plays, that sort of excitement, pairing him up now with Devontae Adams, and like I mentioned, all the other players that they have on their team, that's something that I would like to see it happening. I think that would be amazing for the Raiders and the team that they want to build, and finding their quarterback, making a move that drastic will cost them, but I will want to see what they give up and how competitive they still remain if they were to make a move up like that. And that all stems just from a pro day like this. An impressive pro day from Neighbors now potentially moves him up to wide receiver 1 in a lot of people's minds. And now Jaden Daniels gets a lot more people looking at him and wanting to trade up so far in the draft, going from where the Raiders are, I think at 13 to potentially 2 or 3 is a monumental jump, which will cost them. But at the same time, it could be worth it for these teams. The Broncos are in there as well. Sean Payton hasn't been shy about saying that he wants or is looking at a trade realistically. So that's something to monitor, something to see how it all plays out after them. Jaden Daniels is scheduled to have meetings with Washington, New England, the Giants, the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders after his pro day. So all those are yet to come, and those are more on the personal side, which could also shift this into some of these teams falling in love with some of these prospects. So the pro day is there, kind of building up the excitement, but these official visits are, I think, what really makes the final decision for a lot of these teams with some of these prospects that are impressing day in and day out as the NFL offseason goes on. But I will move on now and transition into another break. And on the other side of the show, the other half of the show, I will be getting into that Hard Knocks change, focusing in on an entire division rather than following just one team. And we'll talk about Brock Purdy's imminent projected extension in 2025 with the San Francisco 49ers. So you're not going to want to miss all of that. All those stories are coming up next on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free.
Back here on the show and talking about the changes coming to Hard Knocks and how it will change drastically following more teams. Before I jump into that, I want to mention one last time, if you have any questions or comments during the show, to use the tip and donations link at the bottom of your screen. To do so, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. For any of your questions and comments, if you use that link, I'm able to read them on air, answer them, and have this be a more engaging show, more proactive and things like that. It makes it a lot more fun for me, having more of a discussion, and it's a big help for the network as well. So again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. We always appreciate it immensely whenever you guys are able to use that. But going back to the topic around Hard Knocks, a very popular show. I think it's getting a lot more notoriety over the last few seasons in following the Dolphins, the Colts, and teams like that. Now, for the first time in 2024, they've shifted now to following an entire division instead of just diving really deep into the behind the scenes of one team like they just recently did with the Miami Dolphins. It is a big move, and I'm excited for this because honestly speaking, I haven't really tuned into Hard Knocks that much. I don't know if that's going to kill me with NFL fans and, how could you not watch Hard Knocks? But it hasn't really gained or really hasn't piqued my interest in seeing it. It could be because of the teams as well. The most interesting team, in my opinion, recently was the Dolphins and seeing how all that worked out. But before, it really didn't it really didn't reel me in because in 2021 they had the Colts on there. In 2022 it was the Cardinals. Just recently it was the Dolphins. And Hard Knocks debuted back in 2001 and only focused on a team during training camp. Then it shifted to a preseason edition of Hard Knocks and an in-season edition in 2021, like I mentioned with the Colts, the first in-season edition team. Then it started growing, I think, a bit more with other people, but even still, it didn't reel me in, like I mentioned. And now this news has really piqued my interest because when Mike Garafolo reported what Brian Rolapp said, the chief media and business officer of the NFL, he said that they were going through with these changes. Mike Garafolo was the first one to report it. And now you have my interest because when you're talking about multiple teams, a whole division, you could take this really in an endless amount of directions, really. If you're trying to find the story, where to follow, how long can you make these episodes. That's really one of the biggest things the NFL wanted to do. They felt that with only one team, they couldn't really control or predict the storylines and how it will play out during the season. They could get lucky and have a really good team and follow them longer, or unlucky in some sense that you have a bad team and it's really not looking good for them. It's interesting because you get to look behind the scenes and see why things are going bad or why things are going really well with a really successful team. Or you can get someone in the middle that's an average team, gets some big wins, has some bad losses, and it's really a roller coaster following that team. All of that had its perks, had its positive sides to it, but I think it will be repetitive, and I think it could get old, at least for me, seeing the same team. And if they're just bad the whole season, you constantly see why they're bad. It can get old seeing all these negative things, even with a good team as well, seeing just if it's all going good behind the scenes and it's all positive and well. Unfortunately, people want to see some arguments, some clashing sometimes. So the middle team would actually work the best, but it's still only one team, so you do just get the same players, the same characters for just a duration of the season. I like where they're going with this direction, change of direction with going with an entire division. It opens it up an entire landscape of different ways they could go, formulate the storylines, and it also said that no division has been selected yet, which leaves me to predict what divisions could be chosen. I have a few that I like. There's definitely some favorites. I think the biggest favorites are the AFC West division. I think just looking at who's in there, what makes up that division, what kind of storylines you can follow. You have two new coaches in there, really, officially. Antonio Pierce was the interim head coach last year, so now he gets to take the official reins of the Raiders. Jim Harbaugh is there. Everybody wants to know what Jim Harbaugh is doing, following him, seeing what he says and stuff like that. So that's already an attraction. Plus, you have the Chiefs. Like I mentioned, they're a really good team, and I've dogged on that idea already. But they're on the cusp of making history with a three-peat, trying to go back-to-back-to-back, winning Super Bowl. So you could document all that history-making behind the scenes of what went into following this three-peat that's never been done in the NFL. So that's a story that's writing itself already. And then you have the Broncos that gives you a bit of everything because they're, you don't want to say really bad, but they're on the other end of the spectrum of being where the Chiefs are heading in this season, if you know what I mean. So you get a little bit of everything. You get the Broncos on one end trying to figure out what to do with their team. You have the Raiders, who are trending up, have some promising stars. You could follow a story with them trying to find a new quarterback. If they draft one, how that affects the season. If they make a big trade, that's also something to draw people in. The Chargers as well, who they pick at number 5. How the development of Justin Herbert goes with his relationship of Jim Harbaugh and following Jim Harbaugh's return to the NFL. That's also interesting to see. I mentioned the Chiefs already, how that could all work out. So the AFC West is clearly the favorite for me. Other ones that I think could garner some interest are the NFC East because of, obviously, you got the Saquon trade. A lot of Cowboys players went to the Commanders. Dan Quinn went from the Cowboys to the Commanders. Now he's their head coach. So those are things to see in there. What did I mention? The Giants as well, trying to figure out what they do with this season with Daniel Jones coming back, seeing if he's their guy or not, trying to figure out the rest of their roster and how they figure that out. If Dable and Joe Shane make it to another season potentially, if they have a good one, or they could be gone if they have another bad season like they just did. So that's an option. The NFC North, I think, is an underrated one just because, you have Caleb Williams coming in there. The Packers showed a lot of promise last year, going toe-to-toe with the 49ers. Could have arguably been in the NFC Championship game with the Lions, who also obviously are in that division, trying to rebound after reaching the peak of their best season ever, how they respond to that. And then, who am I missing? The Vikings trying to deal with Justin Jefferson and his contract extension, now trying to find a quarterback for him as well. Those two are underrated. I don't think they have as much attraction as the AFC West just because you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Jim Harbaugh in there. So, to me, they're the leading candidates. Those two are close tied second. And then you have the safest option for me, which is the AFC North. Probably one of the most consistently good divisions, if not the most consistently good competitive division in the NFL. Still has and can provide good storylines with the Steelers, bringing in Arthur Smith, revamping the entire quarterback room, stealing Patrick Queen from the Ravens, trying to figure out what this offense can finally look like, and seeing if they finally get over the hump and win a playoff game after 7 years, I want to say. Derrick Henry obviously going to the Ravens, how they respond about losing in the AFC Championship in the way that they did, going away from Lamar and his running ability, how that changes with Derrick Henry. They lost a lot of players, so that could draw in more people and cause some friction in there with the Ravens. Joe Burrow, how he is recovering from his injury. Jamar Chase, and potentially T. Higgins being there, not being there, trying to deal with being franchise tagged. That could draw more people in. And the Browns as well have a great defense, bringing in Jerry Jeudy, trying to figure out what their quarterback situation is. I think they have 4 guys now that are pretty decent players, or at least they have decent backups that have shown good things in the NFL. Plus Deshaun Watson there, earning a lot of money, struggling to stay healthy, how that all works out. Everybody in that division is just flat out really good and competitive. So Hard Knocks can make a story out of that, and seeing how that all develops. I didn't mention some, the AFC North isn't really there. I don't think anybody really wants to see that. The NFC South as well. You have Kirk Cousins in there. The Saints, I couldn't really find too much to say about the Saints. The Bucks are another one trying to improve on their playoffs, but they didn't make my list. The AFC East as well. It can get interesting with the Patriots if you want to follow them, how the Bills kind of reshape their offensive identity potentially with only really Stephon Diggs there as the biggest star, how that affects them, losing so many players. Yeah, that's there, but again, we're talking about an entire division, and I think these other divisions offer you more with all of their teams instead of those other divisions. They just followed the New York Jets also in the AFC East, so I don't think that will draw too many people in. So AFC West, the clear favorite for me. NFC East and NFC North are right there for second. And if they want to fall back on a safe option, I think the AFC North, they'll never regret following the AFC North is what I'm trying to get at. So Hard Knocks is going to look very different in season edition. We're going to see which division they go with. I think it's going to be one of these 4 that I laid out there. So I'm excited to see that. I'm definitely going to tune in this time. I haven't watched Hard Knocks, but I'm definitely going to tune in, especially if it's the AFC North. I'm definitely going to see what it's all about, how they lay out these episodes, and how they formulate this storyline throughout the season. Hopefully, whichever division they pick makes a deep run at the Super Bowl. So that's also something to take into account. But I will leave it there and move on with this show. The last break of this live show is coming up, and on the other side of it, I'm going to get into Brock Purdy and the 49ers situation regarding his contract, them being surprisingly more open to it compared to a lot of other teams when talking about extensions. So that and more details on Brock Purdy's contract coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you all for staying to the end of the show. Thank you for joining me for this last segment of the show, rounding off with the 49ers and their contract situation with Brock Purdy. It seems like they're very open and very adamant about getting a deal done. Brock Purdy, obviously the biggest story around him is he was Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft, pick number 262 in that draft, and now to see where he is now, leading the 49ers to Super Bowls, being missed immensely when he got hurt in that NFC Championship game against the Eagles. Had a second chance to get over that this year, was able to do that, bring him to the Super Bowl. They fell short against the Kansas City Chiefs, but overall it was a great game. It was still very competitive. He's still young for a quarterback to be battling against Patrick Mahomes. Their entire team is really well, and that's kind of where this contract extension starts to formulate a little bit, because they have an amazing team, and now you're talking about extending Brock Purdy. He's eligible next offseason to be extended, but that's really what you're talking about right now. The biggest question with this extension is it Purdy, or is it just that they have an insanely, ridiculously talented team that makes him look a lot better? Can other quarterbacks be thrown in there and produce as well as Brock Purdy did at least a year ago? Because on top of making the Super Bowl and an NFC Championship, he threw for 4,280 yards, a nearly 70% completion percentage, 31 touchdowns, and an 113 QBR rating for them, a team record for yards thrown in a season as well, 4,280. So, really impressive season from Brock Purdy in the regular season. Looks very impressive when you see these numbers out there. I lay them out, and you see that he's up there with some of the best in yards. Completion percentage is really high at 70%. 31 touchdowns as well is nothing to sneeze at. So, if he plays like he has been and proves with these numbers that he is of that caliber, I think it's hard to make an argument and saying that he doesn't deserve that if he keeps performing like he has in the regular season. Like I mentioned, the team and the talent that he has around him, yeah, other quarterbacks don't have that. It's evident more with a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, because it just seems like they, thinking on this side of the argument, it just seems like they more often than not win you games, and they throw the team on their back and perform abnormal throws, abnormal plays that wins their team's games, and the defenses and everyone can just, shrug and just think, what can I do? This quarterback is just different from anything we've seen. That is that argument. It's a good argument, in all honesty, because comparing just player to player, Brock Purdy can't really do all that athletic plays that Mahomes, Josh Allen can do, really. But at the same time, thinking about it, do you want your quarterback to be doing that all the time? Do you want your quarterback to always be winning you games? sure, it's nice having him be the reason that you do win games and he makes some nice throws or makes some great plays. Not to say that Brock Purdy can't escape the pocket and run. He made a lot of those plays, extending plays in the playoffs last season. But he's not always going to be the hero. He's not always going to throw on his cape. And nobody expects him to do that on a consistent basis like they expect Mahomes or Josh Allen to do. But again, I'll just throw it out there. Do you want your quarterback to always have to do that in tough games? Some teams like the 49ers, I'm sure they don't. And I'm sure they'll say that their planning around their team building is better than these other teams, which is why Brock Purdy doesn't have to do much, which again is another solid argument to use. They don't want their quarterback to always be throwing everything on the line and having to do extra to win them close games if they can build their team better than all these other teams, quite frankly, and win games that way comfortably, rely on their defense, which is really good. It's not, Brock Purdy's fault that he was drafted last. It's not his fault that he was drafted and the 49ers took a chance on him with the last pick of the draft, and he's on this great team. It's a merit that he is a starting quarterback now, and he took advantage of this opportunity. He did show some throws in the playoffs where you kind of cringe a little bit and see that, that wasn't a good throw, or what was he thinking with that? A lot of them didn't get intercepted, or he didn't pay for some of those throws, but he also made some game-changing plays, like I mentioned, extending plays, running outside the pocket, gaining yards with his feet. So it is valid to state that he is, right now, you can really say that he is still in a prove-it year if you want to go as far. If I want to stay balanced and say that not really taking a side right now, because I, in all reality, still have my thoughts. I see both sides of the argument, and I want to think that he is a good quarterback because I don't really think that any quarterback could go in there and be great, take them to Super Bowls. I think he does have something about him that makes him different, but it is hard to see with all the talent that they have on their team. But on his extension and this question surrounding him, the 49ers CEO, Jed York, spoke on this and his extension and what he thinks of it. He said that it's a good problem when your quarterback is one of the highest paid guys on your team and in the league. It's what the market is. Brock is going to ask for something that no one has ever asked for before. That was through Mercury News. He seems to be pretty open about it, just accepting that it is the market, it is the kind of situation that quarterbacks find themselves in. And if you want a good quarterback, you can't have good quarterbacks for free. You're going to have to pay up for what they do for your team. All these other quarterbacks have been paid. Joe Burrow has recently gotten a new contract. Lamar has gotten a new contract. Patrick is still on that huge contract, 10-year contract, I think it was, that he signed. So Brock is now sort of leading that new charge of younger quarterbacks that are looking to get extended. Herbert was also extended recently as well. So now Brock is sort of leading that next group of younger quarterbacks to try and get their first contract, trying to get paid in the NFL. And 9 quarterbacks currently make over $40 million per year on their current deal. Could you name 9 better quarterbacks legitimately, not just on talent, because that obviously can sway the vote. It's more subjective if you just compare talents. Are there 9 quarterbacks that can fit into this 49ers system and can carry and take the 49ers into the playoffs and be successful? I think people would struggle with that more than they think. I'm sure you can name Josh, Patrick, Lamar, Justin, Joe. That's already 5 quarterbacks. You can throw Jalen Hurts in there, that's 6. Just based on talent and attributes that they have. Those guys have great arms. A lot of them are pretty big. A lot of them are hard to tackle while running. And that's 6 quarterbacks right there. I didn't mention Herbert. You can throw him in there. That's 7. And then you get to Dak Prescott, do you want to say he's better? He hasn't performed it like a top quarterback in the playoffs. So I don't really think you could just plug him in and expect change with the 49ers. Other quarterbacks that you might want to throw in there, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. Rodgers, if you want to throw him in there still, he could be 8. And I think Brock could slide in there at 9. I am struggling. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is talented, but he hasn't gotten his Jacksonville Jaguars team that far in the playoffs either. You could say he's more talented, but again, that's subjective if you're just comparing them. Seeing what Trevor Lawrence has done with his really good Jacksonville Jaguars team, he has some weapons there, or he did at least this past season. They didn't make the playoffs. You saw how badly they fell off. So can you really say that he could just go into the 49ers and something will change with them? Brock Purdy can sort of fit in there, and a lot of people don't give him credit for fitting the mold of 49ers quarterbacks that they're looking for, that Kyle Shanahan is looking for, that fit into their system perfectly. You don't always have to have the biggest, strongest arm kind of guy to win you games. He makes the most sense for the 49ers in their situation with the system that they're trying to run, and I think that holds immense value than just having all these talented guys. Fitting into a system and executing in that system hold a lot of value, more value than I think a lot of people really want to admit. And on the contract extension, again, their CEO, Jed York, mentioned that, or he pointed to Jimmy G's contract and Colin Kaepernick's contract as well when he cited, trying to figure this all out with Brock Purdy. He pointed to those 2 contracts as signs that they're willing and they're able to do what is necessary to retain their quarterbacks. Jimmy G got a pretty big contract with the Niners, and they also gave Colin Kaepernick an extension as soon as he was able and eligible to be extended. That isn't Brock Purdy right now. That's going to be him next season. So they've already shown trends of feeling confident in their quarterbacks, and if they have performed, they'll be willing to give him an extension. That's great for Brock Purdy. But the biggest caveat in all of this is how he plays next year. Like I mentioned at the start of this, it is still sort of a prove it, trying to maneuver through this gray area still with Brock Purdy, because he does a lot of good, and in my opinion, fits them perfectly. It is the kind of quarterback that they need, but to justify, we're talking about $40 to maybe more $1 million, you have to be 110% that this guy is going to has only shown you good performances, but will continue to do it further down the line. And this next year, I think, will be pivotal for that, because it is sort of like a contract year for Brock Purdy. They're coming off a Super Bowl loss. They want to get back there, obviously, and finally get over that hump. If he's able to do that, sign it right there. If he wins them the Super Bowl, he's going to get a massive extension, because they're not going to win a Super Bowl without him playing well. So if he does that, even if he gets back to the Super Bowl, I think it's still a guarantee that they sign him. But another thing to just monitor and see how it plays out is Brandon Ayuk's contract, obviously, because he has slowly become his favorite target, Brock Purdy's favorite target, and they've built a good relationship over the last 2 seasons. Last season, Brandon Ayuk having a great year with Brock Purdy, so you want to make sure to maximize Brock Purdy that you get his number 1 guy or one of his number 1 guys back on the team. So that's something to watch and see how it all plays out, and that could affect Brock Purdy's performance next season if they lose him and don't replace him, or if he does come back, then there's really no excuse to how they perform on the field, which is the biggest thing. That'll be the biggest determinant in how much money Brock gets, and if he gets that extension. I think they will give him the extension, but talking about money, how much he'll make compared to some of these other guys is always a big talking point and a big determinant in figuring out these contracts, especially for a young guy that has been doing them a big favor in being on that rookie contract, earning so little still. To finally pay him, he's earned it, but now the 49ers have to cough that up for everything that he's done for them. And that'll develop more next season and throughout this whole season on how they perform. I expect the deal to get done. And if I were to throw a number out there just to wrap this up, I would probably think he falls somewhere between 43 to maybe 46 million per year. 40 is really the cutoff at top 10. So I think he'll make more than that. I think the 49ers will pay more than that for their rookie, Mr. Irrelevant quarterback that they drafted a few years back. But that's all the time I will have for that segment and for the show. Always a big thank you for you guys for tuning in. And remember to please like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to follow also the network on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of the network's content outside of sports as well. If you want to see more of me and this show's content, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel over on YouTube for all the past live shows that are fully recorded on there if you want to go and check those out. The YouTube shorts that are posted every weekday are also on there on other NFL topics around the league, and individual segment videos on each of the segments. If you missed a certain segment or want to go back and rewatch one, they're all on there as well. Again, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions, topics around the NFL and just football in general. With me as your host, Manny Maradiaga, thanking you guys for tuning in again, and hopefully I'll see you guys all tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.